Welcome everyone for coming to this well-scheduled First Fridays when there's a million other exciting things happening right now. I'm gonna start recording because I figure, oh wait, somebody else already recording? You are? Okay, great. Figure people might want to see this later. So, you know, First Fridays, we generally want to have more of a conversation format, but because we just sent out assessment results and we know that it's a couple of weeks until you guys get to have parent-teacher conferences, we thought we'd spend the time today kind of going over assessments again, just like the general kinds, talking to you about the two different assessments that you got results for, NWEA MAP and reading data. And then on this call, myself, Carly Hurlebaus, who's our assistant head of school, Mary Beth Washington, our elementary coach, and Denise Miles, our director of student support, who will be able to answer individual assessment questions. So after any kind of whole group questions, if you want to look specifically at your child's reports with somebody, Betsy will pop you into a breakout room with one of us. And so that's going to be the format for today. All right, so for those of you who attended our family orientation week, some of this will be review, but we just want to kind of go over the different kinds of terms as it pertains to assessments. So universal screens, the process of providing a brief assessment to all students to identify those who may experience lower than expected academic outcomes. A benchmark assessment, benchmark or interim assessment, is a comparison of student understanding or performance against a set of uniform standards within the same school year. So when we talk about the NWEA MAP assessment today, that is a benchmark assessment. Progress monitoring is used to assess students' academic performance, quantify their rates of improvement or progress towards goal, and determine how they are responding to instruction. Progress monitoring is something that can be used for individual students or for a group of students. And then when we talk about outcomes, we're talking about a statement of what a student should understand and be able to do as a result of what he or she has learned in a course or program. So those are very basic terms that are universal, not specific to Montessori. All right, next slide. And so then this is the part that I always have to look back and check again. So we will send these slides out too. The difference between formative and summative assessments. So formative assessment is the feedback loop between teachers and students intended to improve teaching and learning along the way, and thereby also improving the quality of the end outcome. This also includes teacher self-assessment and student self-assessment. A summative assessment are the measures of performance at given points in a course. So this is when you talk about like finals or your term papers, things like that. A formal assessment is database tests that measure what and how well the students have learned. They determine proficiency or mastery of the content and can be used for comparison against certain standards. Both the NWEA MAP and reading level assessments are formal assessments. An informal assessment is the spontaneous forms of assessment that can be easily done in day-to-day classroom activities. So those are observation notes in Montessori. That's seeing that you've mastered one area of a material before you move into the next. The built-in control of area or error of the materials, as well as also in our virtual time, the portfolio things that are created through Seesaw and other platforms. All right. So looking at Lee's assessment system, we do all of these different kinds of assessments. The universal screens that the survey you fill out right away when you come into the school is a kind of universal screen. DESA, which we've talked about in our last few sessions, our new social emotional piloted assessment this year, is also a universal screen. Our formative assessments are what we do in observations, parent-teacher conferences, targeted observation, as well as work with the self-correcting materials. Benchmark assessments, which we're going to be talking about today, Headsprout and Raz Kids, NWEA MAP, and Montessori benchmarks as well. And then summative assessments that happen for our students in third grade starting for Park, and fifth grade for DC Science and Health are Park, DC Science Health, DC Health, or DC Science, DC Health are our summative assessments. We are unclear if those will happen this year or not. They, as you might remember, did not happen last year. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about specifically is NWEA MAP. So all of you should have received if your child is in kindergarten or higher, a family level report from NWEA MAP. That family report is just giving you the RIT score and the growth score. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But MAP is a nationally normed reference assessment. It is linked to Park, which is why many schools use NWEA MAP, because it does provide a predictor score, although you don't see that predictor score until higher grades. It's adaptive, so students answer the questions and then it moves up and down in difficulty. So, that's why you see the groupings. So there's the K to 2 test, and then there's a 2 to 5 test. So at Lee Montessori, we use it to test in reading and math 3 times a year. We only test our kindergartners on the math section, not the reading section. So what you will have seen on your family reports is a RIT score, and that's the scale that NWEA uses to measure achievement, directly related to curricula scales. So the RIT score is just basically an achievement score. And then the timing of the test depends on the grade and the level of a student. It should take anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. Those of you who experienced it at home know that this testing session was definitely different than what we've experienced in the past. You may have gotten a call from us saying, we're gonna actually have your child do that again because they finished in 12 minutes, which is similar to what sometimes happens with newer students taking it during the school year as well. So you can go to the next slide. And so there's some points of interest about MAP that we want to call your attention to today as we start to look at the assessments. So first of all, there are new norms this year for NWEA MAP that were just released. And the link is in this presentation, which we will send out, but I'm also going to put it in the chat here as well. Maybe, let's see if that's going to work for me. Let's see. Let me know if that works. So you can use this document from NWEA MAP to kind of see where your child's RIT score falls along their scales. What I will caution everybody is that these norms were always planning to be released this year, and so they are not taking COVID learning loss into consideration. So they're right now looking at what the COVID trends are across the nation to release new norms that take that into account as well. And then the norms for growth scores for the K-2 test have not been released yet. So the K-2 test is a new test this year. And so when you're looking at someone who took the K-2 test last year and took it this upcoming, and then has taken it, the growth scores that are listed right there are actually, or the norms have not been released yet. So those are expected to come out in December and will give us a better idea of how to set goals based on the K-2 test for children who have taken it before. If your kindergartner is just taking it for the first time this year, then we will have the growth norms by the time they take it again. One of the things to note is that across the board, both campuses, we had extremely high scores in kindergarten this year, and like enough that it feels like an anomaly. And so, you know, we're looking at our data and seeing what's going on in classrooms to see like what is causing that trend. So those of you with kindergarten students will note high scores. You know, there's two kind of factors. One, that children in kindergarten, when they take it with us, are taking it for the first time ever. They're, you know, a testing environment's brand new to them, whereas they got to take it in their homes with their parents where they feel comfortable. And then frankly, our children are exponentially better at navigating technology and drag and drop menus and all of those things than they've ever been due to virtual learning. So we think that those could be factors as well. Sometimes people ask about discrepancies in reading levels. If your reading level showed that your child is, you know, maybe right on grade level or slightly below, whereas their MAP test shows a really high reading score. The K-2 test is read to the students for the most part until they start getting lots of answers right, and it does get more difficult. And so in that situation, a child can score high in the reading area because they have strong or they have strong comprehension skills, strong vocabulary skills, but might need more support in like their foundational literacy skills. And then the other thing that MAP has done is put out a standard of recovery norms because with again, the idea that across the nation, there has been significant learning loss due to COVID. So we're not using standard norms to set goals for children this year, but instead using the recovery norms that will tell you like if a child has experienced some sort of COVID related learning loss, that we use those norms to set goals for now until the springtime. I know that was a lot of information all at once, but if anybody has any questions about MAP, feel free to put it in the chat right now, or go ahead and unmute yourself because we're such a small group. All right. So NWEA MAP is pretty straightforward. What I will say is that our reading level data is much less complicated, or much more complicated. So in a traditional school year, we do something called the DRA, which is the Developmental Reading Assessment. This is sometimes a 30 to 45-minute reading conference with the child's teacher, where they're finding exact reading levels, they're doing comprehension, they're doing some writing responses, and we give every child a reading level. What we started doing last year was if children are on or above grade level in the beginning of the year, that at our higher grades, then we are not reassessing unless there's a concern. Our kindergartners, DRA is one of the assessments that we report out to the public charter school board and the public. So that is assessment that we do the benchmarks across fall, winter, and spring for kindergarten, and then as needed for the higher levels after the first period. So what we've put here in this chart is a really basic reading level correlation chart. So the publisher guidelines, can you go back? Perfect. So DRA levels 1 through 3 are considered kindergarten levels. 4 through 16 are considered first grade levels, 18 through 28 second grade, and then you can see the 3rd through 8th grade levels below as well. Now this year, because we were not able to do the DRA assessment, you can go to the next slide, Betsy. We were not able to do the DRA assessment in virtual. We used a variety of measures to find children's reading levels. As you remember, we asked for families to help their child complete the HeadSprout reading level assessment or the Raz Kids reading level assessment with kind of varying degrees of success. And then for children who we could not get a valid reading score from those, went in and did some running records as well. The fun part of that is that the reading level A to Z scores are different than the DRA scores, but there are several correlation charts. So I'm also going to link a correlation chart in this chat for you guys to look at as well, that you can do in a bunch of different ways, especially because during this time when you're looking for leveled reading support for students, I think there's lots of different hopefully that link will work. Let me know if it doesn't. There's lots of different leveled resources out there that can kind of give you where your child is. So I just did a screenshot here so you can see that a DRA level 28, if we're looking at my third line down, corresponds to second grade, also corresponds to what is a Raz Kids level O. So in your reading level reports from us, you received both what the Raz Kids level is, which is the letter, and then what the DRA level is, which is a number. Knowing that when we are returning to regular in-person school and assessments, we'll continue to use the DRA score, but when you're looking for books to read with your child at home using our platforms, using Miss Fowler as a resource, as she put in the chat, as well as looking at the books that are assigned through HeadSprout and Raz Kids, those will all be lettered. I also wanted to take a minute to talk about CUSP reading scores, because we had a significant amount of parents reach out about those. And for us, those really showed up on those kind of beginning of 4th grade and beginning of 5th grade. Where you may have gotten a notification that your child is slightly below grade level for reading. So this happened, we saw several parts for children going into 4th grade, where the Raz Kids HeadSprout level assigned to them was around a level T, which you can see third from the bottom, or a 38. And to be technically on grade level for 4th grade, they should be at a 40. And so teachers wanted to make sure that we highlighted that even though the scores show that children might be slightly below grade level, this is where the assessment placed them at the beginning of the year. So they are, most of those children there are like not concerns about, and have, especially if they've been previously on grade level the past few years, which is what most of them were. And then the other thing to look at here is a Lexile level. So these Lexile levels are the ones that are like 600L to 850L. If we were having trouble finding an accurate reading level from both HeadSprout and Raz Kids in a running record, or if there were things that seemed out or off, then we would indicate, we might use your NWEA MAP reading score to look at a Lexile level and check to see if those correlate. I see comments about, is this only for upper L, Suzanne, for yours, about no letters or numbers?
I'm just going to check it. You know, I found on one, it was buried on Annie's. I think I just read past it, but Robbie's is definitely not on there. So.
Okay, we'll double check. Maybe that's an upper L issue. So thanks for bringing that. We'll definitely check on that.
Yeah, that wasn't on Jordan's either. So.
Okay, great. We can get those to you super easily, or for you guys, obviously get them before the end of this session, but resend those out. Thanks for catching that. All right, Betsy, next slide, which I believe is questions. Well, let's see. Yes. All right, so what general questions do people have about, I saw the one from Megan Fowler. So yes, some of our children we shut down in March in the middle of the spring assessment window, or like right at the beginning of the spring assessment window. So there are a small group of children who do have spring 20 assessments. But in general, when we're looking at setting goals, right, the growth goals are looking at fall of last year, or sorry, winter of last year to spring of this year, because we don't have them as a whole. All right, any other group questions?
Can you talk about growth as an assessment tool? If our kids kind of fell off a growth curve, is that something people should be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're waiting for, more like new growth norms to come off too, because and to see if that is like the nationwide trend, right? So we definitely saw that. I think you've heard from Chris that what's interesting is that we have like the highest achievement scores that we've ever had, but definitely have seen some decline in growth. I think we always see that as kids start to kind of top out at really high achievement scores for us anyways. But that's why using those, what we talked about, the growth norm or the recovery goal setting is going to be so important this year, and something that we're looking at. Denise, Denise and I were just talking about, have been talking a lot about using the growth goals. Is there anything else that you would want to add about that?
No, I mean, we do know from MAPS research, which is why they're continuing to dig into growth norms, is that nationwide it's been a general decline in growth overall.
Great. Anybody else?
I have a question, and sorry, I missed the first couple of minutes, but are you going to talk about the math parts of the assessments too, or what to kind of read from those?
The NWEA MAP math.
Yeah.
Yeah, we touched on it at first. So
Okay, cool.
what we're going to do is, when there's no more group questions, is just go into individual breakout rooms. So I'm happy to go into send you in with somebody to look at your scores individually.
Thank you.
I have one question too. I wonder, do we have access to the tests if we wanted to practice them at home with our kids?
You have access to the practice test for NWEA MAP, which is the one that we sent out originally to practice just kind of doing the setup at home. It's very short. It's like 10 questions. So it's not super, like if you've done it once, you've done it. And it is helpful, I would say, especially for like Teo's age. Like some of the tools that are in there are really helpful for them to practice using. As they get older, when they're taking the 2 to 5 test, there's like a calculator tool and a notepad tool. And so those things are helpful to look at. And there's a few video resources like on their site as well. But there isn't another real way to practice that.
Thanks.
When is the next assessment? I'm late too, so
Yeah, so
I already answered that question.
Yeah, winter benchmark will be in January. We have preliminary dates for that. I do think that obviously there's a lot of other things that will be going on in January and figuring out what our our possible return to in-person is. But generally it should be the end of January, potentially the beginning of February. All right, anybody else questions for the group? All right, so we can start going into breakout rooms for people